The week before promotion, my wife's father, the boss, sat me down and said, "We gave your promotion to my nephew. He needs it more for his confidence." Then my wife told me to be proud of supporting the family. I didn't argue. I just packed my bags and left. A year later, his business went bankrupt, and I was quietly making millions without any help from them. Now they keep calling, but I don't pick up. There is a particular kind of quiet that exists in expensive restaurants. Not the comfortable silence of contentment, but the weighted hush of people performing wealth. The careful clink of silverware on porcelain, the murmured conversations that never quite rise above a whisper, the studied elegance of waiters who move like shadows. I used to find it oppressive. Now, sitting across from Richard Hartwell in Le Bernardin, watching him cut his Dover sole with surgical precision, I understand that this quiet is just another language of power. But that night, the night everything changed, the silence was different. It was a Tuesday in March, unseasonably warm for New York, the kind of false spring that tricks the crocuses into blooming too early. I remember because Claire had texted me that morning about planting her mother's garden, something about tulip bulbs and legacy. I'd been married to Claire Hartwell for 3 years by then, together for 5, and I still wasn't entirely sure what she meant when she talked about legacy, but I was about to find out. "Daniel," Richard said, setting down his knife with the deliberation of a judge placing a gavel, "I wanted to talk to you before the board meeting next week." My heart kicked against my ribs. This was it. 6 years at Hartwell and Associates, 4 of them as senior project manager, pulling the commercial development division from consistent losses into a 40% profit margin. I'd personally landed the Riverside Commons project, 12 million in revenue, completed 3 months ahead of schedule and $800,000 under budget. The VP of commercial development position had my name written all over it, or so I'd thought. So everyone had thought. "I appreciate you taking the time, Richard." I kept my voice even, professional. Even after 3 years of marriage, I still called him Richard. He'd never invited me to call him anything else. He nodded, took a sip of his Bordeaux, a 2009 Chateau Margaux, because Richard Hartwell didn't drink wine that cost less than my monthly rent. "You've done exceptional work, Daniel. Truly exceptional. The Riverside project alone exceeded all our projections." "Thank you, sir. The team really came together on that one." "Yes, the team." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It never did. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss. Leadership, vision, the qualities we need in our executive tier." I nodded, trying to ignore the sudden chill in my chest. The air conditioning vent above our table was blowing directly on my neck, and I resisted the urge to adjust my collar. "We've made a decision about the VP position," Richard continued, "and I wanted you to hear it from me first, before it's announced officially." The restaurant seemed to contract around us. A couple at the next table laughed at something, the sound sharp and intrusive. "We're promoting Mason." 3 words, 11 letters, the complete restructuring of my professional life. "Mason," I repeated, and my voice sounded distant to my own ears, like I was hearing myself through water. "Your nephew Mason." "Yes." Richard's expression didn't change. "I know this might come as a surprise. He's been with the company for 9 months. The words came out flat. "Factual." I was good at facts. Facts were safe. "He's currently an associate project manager on my team." 14 months, actually, Richard corrected, as if 2 additional months made the insanity of this decision somehow reasonable. "And yes, he's been learning under your leadership, which we greatly value. Your mentorship has been invaluable to his development." My mentorship. As if teaching someone the basics of construction permitting and client relations qualified them to leapfrog 6 years of experience and proven results. "Daniel." Richard leaned forward, and his tone shifted to something almost fatherly, which somehow made it worse. "Mason is family. And frankly, he needs this. He's struggled to find his footing, to establish confidence in his capabilities. This opportunity will be transformative for him." I stared at him. The candle between us flickered in its glass housing, casting shadows that made Richard's face look carved from marble. Classical, remote, unbothered by the gravity of what he was saying. "This was my project," I said quietly. "Riverside was my design, my client relationships, my vision. I built that from nothing, and we're grateful for that." He picked up his wine again, swirled it thoughtfully. But leadership isn't just about individual achievement, Daniel. It's about elevating others, strengthening the family structure of the organization. Family structure. There it was. You'll continue as senior project manager, of course, Richard continued, with a modest increase in compensation, let's say 8%, to reflect your continued importance to the team. And you'll be integral to Mason's transition into the role. He'll need your institutional knowledge. 8% after generating millions in revenue, after transforming an underperforming division into the company's most profitable unit. 8%, and the privilege of training my own replacement, a replacement who'd been handed my position like a participation trophy. I see, I said, because what else could I say? That this was nepotism at its most naked? That Mason Hartwell couldn't read a site plan without asking for help? That I'd spent the last year and a half covering for his mistakes while he took credit for successes he barely understood? I knew you'd understand. Richard smiled again, that same carved expression. You're a team player, Daniel. It's one of your greatest strengths. Claire's lucky to have married someone so adaptable. Adaptable. The word lodged in my chest like a splinter. We finished the meal in that oppressive quiet, discussing safe topics. The weather, the upcoming charity gala Claire was organizing, the Mets' disappointing season. Richard picked up the check, as always. As I watched him sign the receipt with his Mont Blanc pen, I wondered if this was how it had always been. If I'd been so busy proving myself that I'd missed all the signs that proof was never going to be enough. When we left the restaurant, the false spring had turned cold. Real spring, the kind that stuck, was still weeks away. I stood on the sidewalk watching Richard's town car pull away toward Greenwich, and I felt something crack inside me. Not break, not shatter, just a small, clean fracture, the kind you don't notice until you put weight on it and it gives way completely. I took the subway home instead of catching a cab. It was late, past 10, and the end train was mostly empty except for a few night shift workers and a young couple leaning against each other in that unself-conscious way people do when they're newly in love. I watched them and tried to remember when Claire and I had been like that. Early on, maybe. Before I'd understood the full implications of marrying into the Hartwell family. Before I'd realized that family business meant something very different to them than it did to me. Our apartment was dark when I got home, a two-bedroom in Murray Hill that Claire's parents had helped us with as a wedding gift. Helped us, meaning they'd covered the down payment and continued to cover the maintenance fees, a generosity that Claire mentioned frequently and I tried not to think about. Tonight, though, I thought about it. I thought about all of it, the apartment, the job, the careful architecture of my life, all built on a foundation I hadn't quite realized was borrowed. Claire was already in bed, her blonde hair spread across the pillow like something from a pre-Raphaelite painting. She had her mother's classical beauty, that particular brand of wasp elegance that photographs well at charity functions. I stood in the doorway, watching her sleep, and felt the distance between us like a physical thing. "How was dinner?" she murmured, not quite awake. "Fine." I started unbuttoning my shirt. "Your father wanted to discuss the VP position." She rolled over, suddenly more alert. "Oh? Did he give you any hints about the announcement?" I sat on the edge of the bed, my back to her. Through the window, I could see the city lights, that particular orange glow that New York never quite shakes, even at midnight. "They're giving it to Mason." Silence. Long enough that I turned to look at her. Her expression was not surprised. That was the first thing I noticed. Not shocked, not confused, not indignant on my behalf. Just a careful blankness, the son of studied neutrality her father had worn over his Dover soul. "Well," she said finally, Mason has been working really hard. He's been there for 14 months, Claire." "I know, but—" She sat up, pulling the duvet around her shoulders. "Daddy explained it to me last week. Mason really needs this, Danny. He's been struggling with his self-esteem, and this could be really transformative for him." Last week. She'd known for a week. "You knew," I said. "You've known this whole time, and you didn't tell me. Daddy asked me not to say anything until he'd had a chance to talk to you himself." She reached for my hand, but I stood up, moved away. "He wanted to handle it properly. And honestly, Danny, I think this could be really good for you too. Less pressure. Focus on what you do best." "What I do best." I turned to face her, and something in my voice made her flinch. What exactly is it that I do best, Claire? Project management, client relations, you're brilliant at the technical side of things. The technical side, as opposed to what the leadership side, the strategic vision side, the sides that apparently only Hartwells are qualified for. That's not fair. She threw back the covers, stood up. She was wearing one of my old Columbia t-shirts, and somehow that made it worse. This appropriation of my things, my history, while her family casually dismantled my future. Mason is family, Danny. You knew what you were signing up for when you married into this family. I thought I was signing up for a partnership. I thought building my career at your father's company was about merit. It is about merit, she crossed her arms. But it's also about family, about loyalty, about understanding that sometimes we make sacrifices for the people we love. We, I repeated. You mean me. I make sacrifices. You get to be understanding and gracious about it. You're being incredibly selfish right now. Her voice had taken on that clipped boarding school tone she used when she was done arguing. Mason needs this opportunity. His confidence has been shattered by his divorce, and his confidence? I laughed, and then it came out bitter. What about mine, Claire? What about 6 years of work, of proving myself, of delivering results? Doesn't that matter? Of course it matters, but you're secure. You're talented. You don't need external validation the way Mason does. I stared at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in months. She believed this. She genuinely believed that my career, my ambitions, my accomplishments were somehow less important because I was secure, because I didn't have the fragility that came with being born into wealth and expectations. I'm going for a walk, Chloe, I said. Danny, it's midnight. But I was already grabbing my jacket, already moving toward the door. I needed air, I needed space. I needed to be somewhere where the walls weren't covered in engagement photos and wedding portraits, visible proof of the life I'd built, or thought I'd built, with the Hartwell family. The thing about walking through Manhattan at midnight is that the city strips away all its pretense. The performance ends. The tourists are gone, the business crowds have dispersed, and what's left is the raw infrastructure of the place. Delivery guys on bikes, late shift workers trudging home, the occasional cluster of people spilling out of bars with that loose, liquid intimacy that comes from shared alcohol and anonymous company. I walked east, then south, no destination in mind, just movement, just the rhythm of feet on pavement, and the sharp spring air clearing my head. I thought about my father. He'd been a union electrician in Philadelphia, worked construction sites his whole life. Strong hands, permanent calluses, the kind of practical intelligence that could look at a wiring schematic and see not just what was there, but what was missing, what could go wrong, what needed to change. He'd died when I was 16. Heart attack on a job site, gone before the ambulance arrived. Quick, people said. He didn't suffer, they said, as if the speed of dying somehow compensated for the life left unlived. But before he died, he'd taught me something important. That work mattered. That what you built with your hands and your mind and your sweat had value beyond the paycheck. That craftsmanship was its own reward, its own dignity. Don't let anyone tell you you're less than, Danny boy, he'd said once, after I'd come home from school upset because some kid had mocked my secondhand sneakers. You show them what you can do. You build something so good they can't ignore it. I'd believed that. I'd carried it with me through community college, through my transfer to Columbia on a partial scholarship, through 5 years of grunt work at mid-tier construction firms before Richard Hartwell had offered me a junior position at his company. I'd believed that excellence was its own currency, that if I built something good enough, worked hard enough, proved myself thoroughly enough, I'd be judged on merit. I'd been so incredibly naive. By the time I looked up, I was standing outside Grand Central Terminal. The iconic facade was lit up against the night sky. Those classical columns and arched windows, glowing with the kind of permanence that made human problems feel small. Temporary. My phone buzzed. Claire, probably. I didn't check. Instead, I sat on the steps and let myself feel it. The full weight of what had just happened. Not just the stolen promotion, though that was part of it, but the revelation behind it that I'd never really been a member of the family. I'd been useful, adjacent, a skilled employee who happened to be married to the boss's daughter. But when it came down to it, when the chips were counted and the decisions were made, I was outside the circle that mattered. I thought about Claire's face when she'd said, Sometimes we make sacrifices for the people we love, as if my sacrifice was noble, as if I should be grateful for the opportunity to elevate her cousin, as if my dreams were less important because they hadn't been inherited along with a trust fund in a corner office. A text came through, then another. I finally looked. Claire, please come home. We can talk about this. Claire, you're overreacting. This doesn't change anything between us. But it did change things. It changed everything. Because I finally understood what I'd been refusing to see for 3 years. That in the Hartwell family, there were members and there were staff, and marriage didn't automatically move you from one column to the other. I went home eventually. Not because I'd forgiven anything, but because I was tired and cold and I needed to think, really think about what came next. Claire was asleep again when I slipped into bed, or pretending to be. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathe, and I made a decision. Not the decision I would make a week later. That one would come after another conversation, another casual demolition of my dignity dressed up as family values. But that night, I decided something simpler, that I would pay attention, that I would stop performing gratitude for opportunities I'd earned, that I would document everything, every project, every success, every contribution, with the kind of meticulous detail my father had used when reading electrical plans. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice was whispering something I wasn't quite ready to acknowledge yet. This isn't sustainable. This can't be your life. Something has to give. I just didn't know yet that the thing that would give would be me, that I would be the one to walk away, that in 7 days I would pack a bag and leave behind everything I'd thought I wanted, choosing uncertainty over this particular kind of certainty. But that night, lying in the dark, next to a woman who loved me but didn't respect me, I knew one thing for sure. The silence had to end. One way or another, I was done being quiet. The board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 10 a.m. I had 6 days to prepare, though I wasn't entirely sure what I was preparing for. A gracious acceptance speech? A professional handover of my projects to my unqualified replacement? A mask so well constructed that no one would see the rage simmering underneath? I went to work Wednesday morning with a splitting headache and a coffee that had gone cold on the subway. The offices of Hartwell and Associates occupied the 32nd floor of a building in Midtown, all glass and chrome and that particular aesthetic of expensive minimalism that the wealthy mistake for taste. My office, not a corner office, but respectable, with windows overlooking 42nd Street, felt different that morning. Borrowed, temporary, a set piece I'd been allowed to occupy but never actually own. Mason was already there when I arrived, leaning against my doorframe with that particular brand of casual entitlement that comes from never having to worry about whether you belong. He was 29, tall and lean, with the kind of effortless style that money provides. Today it was a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, no tie, the top button undone, in that studied, casual way. His dark hair was artfully disheveled. He looked like someone from a J. Crew catalog, if J. Crew catalogs featured mediocre executives coasting on family connections. Danny! He straightened up, flashed that trust fund smile. Glad I caught you. Wanted to talk about the Patterson Project timeline. Patterson. A mid-sized retail development I'd landed 3 months ago, currently in the permitting phase. One of 5 major projects I was juggling, each one requiring daily oversight and client management. Sure, I said, setting down my bag. What's the concern? No concern exactly. He followed me into my office, dropped into the chair across from my desk like he owned it. Maybe he did now. Maybe that was the point. Just thinking we could accelerate the schedule, get shovels in the ground by July instead of September. I pulled up the project file on my computer, even though I knew the timeline by heart. July's not feasible. We're still waiting on environmental clearance, and the zoning variance won't be approved until late June at the earliest. Right, but what if we pushed on that? Maybe had Uncle Richard make some calls? Uncle Richard. The casual invocation of power I would never have. The assumption that rules were negotiable if you knew the right people. We could, I said carefully, but it would signal that we're trying to circumvent the process, which could flag us for additional scrutiny. Better to let it proceed normally and use the extra time for value engineering. We're already trending 15% over budget on materials. Mason waved a hand dismissively. Budget's flexible on this one. Patterson's got deep pockets. Having deep pockets doesn't mean we should waste his money. We have a contract with specific terms. Sure, sure. He was already losing interest, his attention drifting to his phone. Just thinking we could make a bigger splash if we broke ground earlier. But you're the expert. You're the expert. Said with just enough condescension to let me know that the expertise, in his world, was less valuable than relationships, than blood. He left after a few more minutes of empty conversation, and I sat there staring at the Patterson file, thinking about timelines and budgets and all the careful work that went into building something real, something that didn't collapse under its own weight. By Thursday, word had spread through the office. Nothing official, but the Whisper network was efficient. People stopped by my office with carefully calibrated expressions, sympathy mixed with wariness, like I was a wounded animal that might bite if approached wrong. Jennifer Chen, my closest ally in the office, and one of the few people who'd been there longer than me, closed the door before she spoke. Is it true? She sat down without waiting for an invitation, her dark eyes sharp with concern. Mason? Apparently. Jesus. Danny. She ran a hand through her short hair, a gesture of frustration I knew well from 5 years of working together. That's insane. You built this division. You tripled our revenue. Family first, I said, and the bitterness in my voice surprised us both. This is about Claire. It's about everything. I swiveled my chair to face her fully. It's about the fact that I've never been anything more than useful to them. The talented outsider. The guy who makes the money but doesn't get a seat at the table. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. Because you have options, you know. Your reputation, what you've accomplished here, firms would line up to hire you." Would they? Maybe, but leaving meant admitting defeat. It meant walking away from 6 years of work, from the vision I'd had of building something lasting. And it meant the end of my marriage because there was no way Claire would choose me over her family. I'd seen that clearly enough Tuesday night. "I'll figure it out," I told Jennifer, which was what you say when you have no idea what comes next. Friday brought another conversation, this one less sympathetic. Richard called me into his office at 4 p.m. The power hour, when the light slanting through his windows was golden and dramatic, when he could sit behind his massive mahogany desk backlit like some kind of corporate deity. "Daniel." He gestured to the chair. "Thank you for making time." As if I had a choice. "I wanted to follow up on our dinner conversation," he continued. "Make sure we're aligned going forward." Aligned, corporate speak for compliant. I appreciate that, Richard. Good, good. He steepled his fingers, a gesture he probably thought made him look thoughtful. "I know change can be difficult, but I'm confident you'll see this as an opportunity. Mason will need a strong number two, someone who understands the operational side while he focuses on strategy and client relationships. Number two, after being the unquestioned leader of this division for 4 years. And I'm prepared to sweeten the deal," Richard continued. "In addition to the 8% raise, we'll allocate an additional junior PM to your team. Take some of the administrative burden off your shoulders." An additional junior PM. More people to train while Mason took credit for their work. "That's generous," I said, "because what else could I say? We value you, Daniel. I wanted to make sure you know that. So you're an integral part of this organization." He leaned forward, his expression almost earnest. "And family. You're family now." Family. The word had changed meaning over the course of 4 days, like a currency that had suddenly devalued. "I appreciate that, Richard." "Excellent." He stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "The announcement will be Monday morning. I'd like you to be there, show your support. It'll mean a lot to Mason, and it'll set the right tone for the team. Be there, smile, clap, perform gratitude for my own humiliation." "Of course," I said. I went home that night and found Claire in the kitchen preparing dinner. Something elaborate. She'd been watching cooking shows lately, had decided she wanted to learn French technique. The apartment smelled like butter and herb, and classical music played softly from the speakers in the living room. It was the kind of domestic scene that should have felt warm, comforting. Instead, it felt like a stage set for a play I no longer wanted to be in. "How was work?" she asked, not looking up from whatever she was sautéing. "Your father offered me an additional junior PM and confirmed the Monday announcement." "That's great." She turned, her face bright with what looked like genuine pleasure. "See? I told you it would work out." Daddy really does value you. I watched her, this woman I'd fallen in love with 5 years ago. She'd been working at a nonprofit then, something to do with art education for underserved kids. We'd met at a fundraiser I'd been dragged to by a colleague, and she'd been funny and sharp and surprisingly down to earth for someone who'd grown up with a summer house in the Hamptons. She'd quit the nonprofit after we got married, said she wanted to focus on building our home, which seemed to mostly involve decorating and planning charity events with her mother. When had she changed? Or had I just failed to see who she really was? Claire, I said, your father is giving my job to your cousin, and you think an extra junior staff member is adequate compensation. Her smile faltered. It's not just your job, Danny. It's a family business. These decisions are complicated. What's complicated about competence? About earned advancement? You're being incredibly stubborn about this. She set down her spatula with more force than necessary. Do you have any idea how difficult this has been for my father? How much he's worried about making the right decision? Worried about Mason's feelings, you mean? Yes, because Mason is struggling, because family means helping each other, even when it's hard, even when it requires sacrifice. There was that word again, sacrifice. And what exactly are you sacrificing? I asked quietly. She stared at me. What? You keep saying we and family, but what are you giving up, Claire? What's your sacrifice in all this? I'm. She stopped, seemed to recalibrate. I'm supporting my father through a difficult business decision. I'm trying to keep the peace in my family. Your family, I repeated. Not our family, not us. Your family, your father's business, your cousin's fragile confidence. You're being ridiculous. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I'm the only one expected to sacrifice anything. My career advancement, my professional dignity, my. I stopped because I'd almost said self-respect, and that felt too raw, too revealing. You're what? She crossed her arms. Say it, Danny. What exactly are you losing here besides your ego? And there it was, the fundamental disconnect. To her, this was about ego, about my inability to be a team player, to understand the bigger picture. It never occurred to her that my accomplishments had value beyond their utility to her family, that I might have dreams that mattered as much as Mason's need for validation. I'm going to bed, I said. It's 7:30. I'm tired, Claire. I left her in the kitchen and went to the bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed in the gathering dark. My phone was in my hand, and before I'd fully decided to do it, I was opening my email and typing a message to a recruiter I'd met 2 years ago at a conference. His name was Marcus Webb, and he specialized in placing senior construction executives. The email was simple. Marcus, hope you're well. I'm exploring new opportunities and would appreciate a confidential conversation about the current market. Are you available this week? Best, Daniel Foster. I hit send before I could second guess myself. Then I opened a new document on my phone and started a list. Every project I'd led, every client relationship I'd built, every dollar of revenue I'd generated, every metric that proved my value, my competence, my right to the position that was about to be handed to someone else. I documented it all, dates, figures, outcomes. The Riverside Commons project that had come in $800,000 under budget. The Patterson retail development I'd landed despite 3 competing bids. The Lexington Tower renovation that had been 6 months behind schedule when I'd inherited it and had been completed on time under my leadership. I documented 6 years of work. 6 years of early mornings and late nights, of solved problems and navigated crises, of built relationships and earned trust. I documented the career that the Hartwell family had decided was worth 8% and a junior PM. By the time I finished, it was after midnight. Claire had come to bed at some point, was sleeping on her side with her back to me. The apartment was quiet except for the ambient hum of the city, that ever-present white noise that was as much a part of New York as the skyline itself. I saved the document, backed it up to the cloud, and then I lay there in the dark, feeling something harden inside me like setting concrete. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable rain, the kind of cold spring downpour that turns the city gray and hostile. I dressed carefully, my best suit, the Burberry tie Claire had given me for our second anniversary, the shoes I'd spent too much money on because they looked expensive and professional and like they belonged in a corner office. The board meeting was at 10. I arrived at 9:30, coffee in hand, prepared to watch my future be handed to someone else. The conference room on the 34th floor had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Midtown, and on a clear day, you could see Central Park. Today, you could barely see the building across the street. Rain sheeted down the glass, turning the view into an impressionist blur. Richard was already there, along with three board members. Old white men in expensive suits, the kind of people who'd never had to prove themselves because they'd been born into rooms like this one. Mason stood near his uncle, looking nervous but excited, like a kid about to receive a birthday present. He saw me and smiled. "Danny, thanks for coming. Wouldn't miss it," I said, and the lie tasted like copper in my mouth. The other department heads filtered in. Jennifer gave me a sympathetic look as she took her seat. James Bradley from Finance nodded curtly. Carol Summers from HR avoided eye contact entirely. At exactly 10 a.m., Richard called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for being here," he began with. "As you know, we've been conducting a strategic review of our leadership structure, particularly in our commercial development division. This division has experienced remarkable growth over the past 4 years, thanks in large part to the exceptional work of our senior project manager, Daniel Foster." He gestured toward me, and everyone dutifully looked my direction. I kept my face neutral, professional. A mask so well fitted it felt like my own skin. "Daniel's leadership has been instrumental in our success," Richard continued, "which is why I'm particularly excited about our next phase of growth. Effective immediately, we're promoting Mason Hartwell to Vice President of Commercial Development." Polite applause. Mason's face flushed with pleasure. "Mason brings fresh perspective and strategic thinking to this role," Richard said, which was one way to describe 14 months of experience. "And he'll be working closely with Daniel, who will continue as Senior Project Manager, to ensure continuity and sustained excellence." More applause. Mason said something gracious about being honored and about the privilege of working with such a talented team, about his vision for the future. I stopped listening. Instead, I watched the rain on the windows, the way it distorted the city beyond, and I felt something cold and clear settle into my chest. This was who they were. This was who they'd always been. And I was done pretending otherwise. After the meeting, people filtered past me with their carefully worded congratulations, their subtle expressions of sympathy or approval or wariness. I accepted all of it with the same professional courtesy, the same mask. Mason cornered me near the coffee station. "Thanks for being here, Danny. I know this is, well, I just want you to know I'm going to rely on you heavily. You're the backbone of this division, and I'm going to need your expertise." "Of course," I said. "Whatever you need." "Great, great." He clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture of false camaraderie that made my skin crawl. "We're going to do great things together." Together. As if we were partners. As if he hadn't just been handed everything I'd worked 6 years to earn. I went back to my office and closed the door, sat at my desk and stared at my computer screen without really seeing it. My phone buzzed. Marcus Webb, the recruiter, responding to my email. "Daniel, great to hear from you. Definitely interested in talking. I have a few opportunities that might be a good fit. Can you do lunch Wednesday? There's something specific I'd like to discuss." "Best, Marcus." I typed back a confirmation, then sat there with my hands on my desk, feeling the weight of the decision I was about to make. That evening, I came home to find Claire hosting her mother for dinner. Elizabeth Hartwell sat in our living room like she owned it, which, given they'd paid for most of it, maybe she did. Drinking white wine and discussing the upcoming charity gala with the kind of intensity most people reserve for actual problems. "Daniel!" She looked up as I entered, her smile warm but distant, the way you might greet a particularly efficient butler. "We were just talking about you. Richard told me how gracious you were this morning. Very classy." Classy, as if accepting my own humiliation was a measure of character, and "Thank you, Elizabeth." "Mason is so excited," she continued, "and really this is best for everyone. You'll have more time to focus on the technical work you love, and Mason gets the leadership experience he needs." Claire appeared from the kitchen with a cheese board, because of course there was a cheese board, because this was the kind of family that had cheese boards for casual Monday dinners. "Isn't it wonderful?" she said, setting down the tray. "Everything worked out." I looked at her, really looked at her bright smile and expensive casual wear. Those artfully distressed jeans probably cost $300, and her complete guileless certainty that this had all worked out fine, that I should be happy. Grateful, even. Wonderful, I echoed. We ate dinner at the dining table, me and Claire and her mother, and they talked about the gala and Mason's new position and how proud Richard was. They talked about family and legacy and the importance of supporting each other. They used words like team and together and us, but every time they said us, they meant them. The Hartwells, the family. I was just the guy who'd married in, the skilled employee, the useful outsider. When Elizabeth finally left around 9, Claire turned to me with a satisfied smile. See? Mom is so pleased about how everything turned out. I told you it would be fine. Claire, I said, we need to talk. Something in my tone made her smile falter. About what? About everything. About this. I gestured around the apartment, at the life we'd built, or that I thought we'd built. About what I actually want. You're not still upset about the promotion, are you? She said it like I was being petulant, childish. I thought we'd moved past this. Moved past it? Claire, it happened this morning, and you handled it really well. Mom said you were very professional about it. Professional? I laughed, and it came out harsh. Is that what matters? That I was professional while your family gutted my career? Gutted? She crossed her arms, and I could see her shutting down, retreating into that defensive posture she took whenever anyone criticized her family. That's incredibly dramatic, Danny. You still have your job. You still have your salary. You're acting like this is some kind of tragedy when it's just business. Just business, I repeated. Just the destruction of everything I've worked for. You're being ridiculous and honestly, kind of selfish. This isn't just about you. It's about Mason and his growth and I know, I interrupted. It's about Mason, about your family, about everyone except me. I've heard the speech, Claire, multiple times now. What do you want me to say? Her voice had gone cold. That it's unfair? Fine, maybe it is. But life isn't fair, Danny, and sometimes you have to make compromises for the people you love. You keep saying that. But when do you compromise? When does your family compromise? We compromise all the time, she said, her voice rising. Do you have any idea how much my parents have done for you? The apartment, the job, the connections. You'd still be working at some mid-tier firm in Queens if it wasn't for my father. And there it was. The thing that had been hovering between us for 3 years finally said out loud, the fundamental belief that I owed them, that everything I'd achieved was because they'd allowed it, that my talent, my work, my accomplishments were somehow less real because they'd happened in their orbit. I think, I said quietly, that I need some space to think. Space, what does that mean? It means I'm going to stay somewhere else for a few days. Clear my head. You're leaving? She looked genuinely shocked, like this possibility had never occurred to her. Over a work thing? Over everything, Claire. Over the fact that your family will never see me as anything more than useful. Over the fact that you agree with them. That's not true, isn't it? Because every time I've tried to talk to you about this, you've defended them. Every time. Not once have you acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, what they're doing isn't okay. She was quiet for a moment, and I thought maybe, she was actually hearing me. Then she said, you should be proud, Danny. Proud of supporting the family. That's what marriage is about. Supporting the family, her family, not us. I went to the bedroom and started packing. Not everything, I wasn't ready for that level of finality yet, but enough for a week or two. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, the folder of documents I'd been compiling. Claire stood in the doorway, watching. Where will you go? She asked. A hotel. I'll figure it out. This is insane. You're throwing away our marriage over a job promotion. I'm not throwing anything away. I zipped up my bag, turned to face her. I'm just finally seeing clearly. Seeing what? That I can't keep doing this. That I can't keep being the person who sacrifices everything while everyone else decides that I should be grateful for the opportunity. You're not sacrificing everything. Claire, I cut her off gently. I generated $4 million in revenue for your father's company last year. I brought in 3 major clients. I completed 5 projects ahead of schedule. And in return, I got 8% and a pat on the head in your cousin's hand-me-down career. She was crying now, tears sliding down her cheeks in that way she had that usually made me want to comfort her. But tonight I felt nothing, no guilt, no regret, just a clear, cold certainty. If you walk out that door, she said. Don't expect me to wait around. I wouldn't dream of it, I said, and then I picked up my bag and left. The rain had stopped by the time I hit the street, but the pavement was still slick, reflecting the streetlights in wavering patterns. I walked for several blocks before I called a car, and in that space, in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: free. I spent that night at a Hampton Inn near LaGuardia. Not glamorous, but clean and anonymous and entirely mine. I lay in the generic hotel bed staring at the textured ceiling and felt the full weight of what I'd just done. I'd walked out on my marriage, effectively quit my job, even if I hadn't said the words yet. Dismantled the life I'd spent 5 years building because I couldn't stomach one more day of being diminished. My phone buzzed throughout the night. Claire mostly, then her mother, then Richard. Messages ranging from concerned to angry to coldly practical. Claire, this is childish. Come home. Claire, Mom is very upset. Call her. Elizabeth, Daniel, I think we should talk about this like adults. Richard, I hope you'll reconsider whatever you're doing. We can discuss this rationally. I didn't respond to any of them. What was there to say that I hadn't already said? Instead, I opened my laptop and started working. Not on Hartwell projects, those felt contaminated now, like artifacts from someone else's life, but on something else. Something that had been percolating in the back of my mind for months, maybe longer. You see, I had ideas, real ideas, innovative approaches to sustainable commercial development that the industry was only beginning to explore. Mixed-use spaces that integrated community resources, modular construction techniques that cut costs and environmental impact, adaptive reuse of historic buildings in a way that preserved character while creating modern functionality. I'd pitched some of this to Richard once, about 2 years ago. He'd listened politely and then explained that Hartwell and Associates had a proven model, thank you, and innovation for innovation's sake wasn't good business. But it was good business. I knew it was. And now, sitting in a hotel room at 2 in the morning with nothing to lose, I started outlining what it would look like to do it right. By dawn, I had the skeleton of a business plan. By Wednesday, when I met Marcus Webb for lunch, I had something more substantial. Marcus was exactly as I remembered him, 50-ish, black, impeccably dressed, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made him very good at his job. We met at a restaurant in Chelsea, somewhere quiet enough to talk. So, he said after we'd ordered, you said you were exploring opportunities. I am. Let me be direct, Daniel. I have been following your career at Hartwell. Your reputation in the industry is excellent. If you're looking to move, I have 3 firms that would be interested, 2 in New York, 1 in Boston. I appreciate that. I took a breath. But I'm actually thinking about something else. Oh? His eyebrows went up. I pulled out my laptop, opened the document I'd been working on. What if, instead of moving to another firm, I started my own? To his credit, Marcus didn't laugh. He leaned forward, interested. Tell me more. So I did. I walked him through my vision, a boutique development firm focused on sustainable, community-integrated projects, smaller scale than the massive developments firms like Hartwell handled, but more innovative, more thoughtful, more profitable, actually, if you did it right. I have relationships with 3 major clients, I explained, built over 6 years. They trust me specifically, not the Hartwell name. And I have projects in the pipeline, proposals I've developed but haven't pitched yet because they didn't fit Hartwell's model. Marcus listened, asked questions, made notes. When I finished, he sat back and studied me. You're serious about this. Completely. Starting a firm is risky, Daniel, especially without significant capital behind you. I have some savings, and I think I can secure seed funding. I'd been researching that part too, late night after late night in the hotel room. There are investors interested in sustainable development. The market's there. The market is, Marcus agreed. The question is whether you are. Running your own firm is different than being a top PM. It's client cultivation, business development, HR, accounting, all the parts you probably hate. I'm aware. I smiled slightly. But I'm also tired of building other people's visions. I want to build my own. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Can I give you some advice? Please. If you're going to do this, really do this. You need to do it clean. No competing directly with Hartwell for existing clients. No poaching employees. No messy litigation that'll drain your resources before you even get started. I wouldn't, I know you wouldn't, intentionally. But Richard Hartwell strikes me as the kind of man who doesn't take kindly to people leaving his orbit, especially family. Especially successful people who make him look bad by comparison. I thought about that, about Richard's carefully cultivated image, his pride in the family business that was really just his business with family members scattered throughout like decorative elements. So, what do you suggest? Take your time, do this right, build your client base carefully from new relationships. Get your financing secured, and when you launch, make sure you're positioned as complementary to firms like Hartwell, not competitive. Different market segment, different approach. It was good advice, smart advice, the kind of long term thinking I'd need if I was going to make this work. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet. Marcus smiled. Thank me when you're successful enough to send referrals my way. We talked for another hour about financing, about market positioning, about the contacts he had who might be interested in what I was building. By the time we parted ways, I had a list of potential investors to approach and a clearer sense of what the next 6 months might look like. I also had a decision to make. I went back to the apartment that afternoon knowing Claire would be at her weekly tennis game with her mother. I needed clothes, documents, my good laptop. I needed to extract myself from this space that had never really been mine. But when I opened the door, Claire was there. She was sitting on the couch, still in her tennis clothes, her eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying. When she saw me, she stood up fast. Danny, I thought you'd be at the club. I canceled. I wanted to be here in case you came back. She moved toward me, then stopped, uncertain. Are you? Are you here to stay? I'm here to get my things. Her face crumpled. So that's it? You're really leaving? Claire, did the last 3 years mean nothing to you? Does our marriage mean nothing? I set down my keys carefully on the entryway table. What marriage? Claire, the one where your family makes decisions about my career without consulting me? Where you defend them at every turn? Where I'm expected to be grateful for being treated like hired help? That's not fair, isn't it? Tell me one time, one single time, you've chosen me over your family. She opened her mouth, closed it. Couldn't find an answer. That's what I thought, I said quietly. I love you, she said, and her voice broke. Doesn't that count for anything? Love isn't enough, Claire. Not when there's no respect. Not when I'm always going to be the outsider, the one who has to sacrifice for the real family. You're my husband, am I? Because it feels like I'm your father's employee who happens to share your bed. She flinched like I'd hit her. And maybe that was cruel, but it was also true. The fundamental truth we'd both been avoiding for 3 years. If you leave, she said, her voice hardening, don't expect to come back. Don't expect forgiveness. I don't, I said. I don't expect anything from you anymore, Claire. That's kind of the point. I went to the bedroom and packed the rest of my things. Clothes, books, the photo albums from my childhood. My mother had given them to me when she'd downsized after my father died. Personal items, documents, the few possessions that were mine and only mine. Claire watched from the doorway, crying silently. Where will you go? She asked finally. I'll figure it out. Daddy will blacklist you. You know that, right? He knows everyone in this industry. If you try to work in New York, then I guess I'll have to be better than everyone else, I said. I finished packing. 3 suitcases and 2 boxes, the sum total of my life in this apartment, this marriage, this version of myself that I was leaving behind. At the door, I turned back. Claire was still standing in the bedroom doorway, and she looked young suddenly, younger than her 30 years. Vulnerable in a way that might have moved me a week ago. I'm sorry, I said. I'm sorry it had to end like this. You're choosing this, she said. You're choosing to leave? No, I corrected gently. I'm choosing not to stay. The difference was everything. I left the keys on the table. The apartment was in her name anyway. Had always been in her name, and walked out. This time I didn't look back. The next 6 months were brutal. I found a studio apartment in Astoria, a 6th-floor walk-up with a view of nothing but other apartment buildings, but affordable on my rapidly dwindling savings. I filed for divorce, an uncontested filing that Claire signed with what the lawyer described as visible reluctance. We split our minimal shared assets, mostly furniture I didn't want anyway, and I walked away from the marriage with less than I'd entered it with. But lighter, definitely lighter. I resigned from Hartwell and Associates with a professional two-page letter thanking them for the opportunity and citing desire to explore new directions. Richard tried to call me 3 times. I didn't pick up. There was nothing left to say. Mason sent me an email. Sorry to see you go. Hope there's no hard feelings. If you ever want to grab a drink and talk about old times, let me know. I deleted it. Jennifer Chen called me the day my resignation was announced. You're really doing it, she said. You're leaving. I am. Can I ask what you're planning? So I told her about the business plan, about the vision, about the investors I'd started talking to, about the idea of building something new, something mine. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, if you need someone who knows their way around project management and isn't afraid of startup risk, let me know. I've been thinking about a change myself. That conversation gave me something I'd been missing, hope that I wasn't completely insane. I spent those months networking, pitching, refining my business plan. And I met with investors, some interested, some skeptical, all of them asking hard questions about why they should bet on a guy with no track record running his own company. I met with potential clients, mostly smaller organizations and nonprofits, who couldn't afford the big firms but needed quality development work. I built a website, registered the business, fostered development groups, simple and clean. I also, in the quiet moments, mourned the life I'd left behind. Not the marriage necessarily, that had been dying for longer than I'd wanted to admit, but the idea of it. The vision I'd had of partnership, of building something together, of being part of something larger than myself. But there were other things larger than myself, better things, things that didn't require me to shrink to fit. By month 4, I had my first client, a nonprofit community organization in Brooklyn looking to develop a mixed-use building with affordable housing and community spaces. Modest budget, tight timeline. Exactly the kind of project that big firms ignored, but that could be incredibly impactful if done right. I hired Jennifer as my first employee. By month 6, I had 3 projects and 2 more in proposal stage. Not huge revenues yet. I was barely breaking even, but momentum, proof of concept, a portfolio that showed what was possible when you prioritized innovation over tradition. I also started hearing things through the industry grapevine. Hartwell and Associates was struggling. Mason had lost a major client, the Patterson project I'd landed, actually. Apparently, he'd pushed for that accelerated timeline he'd suggested, ignored the environmental clearance issues, and gotten the whole project flagged for regulatory review. The client had walked, taking a $3 million project with them. Another project had gone wildly over budget. Another had been delayed by 6 months due to permitting issues Mason hadn't anticipated. The commercial development division, my division, the one I'd built, was hemorrhaging money. I felt no satisfaction in this, or at least I told myself I didn't. But there was something grimly validating about watching them struggle without me, about seeing proof that my contributions had mattered more than they'd wanted to admit. Jennifer heard more through her remaining contacts at the firm. Richard is panicking, she told me one afternoon over coffee. Mason is in over his head, and everyone knows it. They've lost 2 major clients in 3 months. That's unfortunate, I said neutrally. There's more. She leaned forward. Apparently there's talk of restructuring, maybe even layoffs. The board is not happy. I thought about all those people I'd worked with, the junior PMs and administrative staff who'd had nothing to do with the nepotistic disaster, but would suffer for it anyway. I thought about the projects half finished, the clients frustrated, the slow unraveling of something that had once functioned well. Not my circus, I said. Not my monkeys. Danny. Jennifer gave me a look. You're allowed to feel vindicated. Vindicated doesn't pay my rent, I said, which was true, but also deflection. Because the truth was more complicated, part of me did feel vindicated. Saw the poetic justice in watching the Hartwells fail at the thing they'd stolen from me. But another part, the part that had genuinely cared about the work, about building things that mattered, just felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that competence mattered so little compared to bloodlines. By month 8, I'd stopped checking on them. I had enough of my own work to focus on, enough of my own momentum to maintain. Foster Development Group was growing, slowly, carefully, but growing. I'd hired 2 more people, moved into a real office space in Long Island City, started to build something that felt sustainable. And then, at month 11, my phone started ringing. The first call came on a Tuesday morning in January, almost exactly a year after Richard had sat me down in Le Bernardin and explained that my work wasn't quite as valuable as Mason's need for confidence. I didn't recognize the number, let it go to voicemail. When I listened later, I heard Richard's voice, carefully modulated and professionally pleasant. Daniel, it's Richard Hartwell. I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to reach out and see if you might have time for a conversation. There are some opportunities I'd like to discuss. Please call me back at your convenience. I deleted the message. The second call came 3 days later. This time it was Mason. Hey, Danny. Long time. Listen, I know things ended kind of weird between us, but I wanted to talk to you about potentially collaborating on something. There's this project that could really use your expertise. Give me a call back? I deleted that message too. The third call was Claire. Her voice was different, smaller, less certain than I'd ever heard it. Danny, it's me. I know I probably have no right to call you, but could we talk? Please, it's important. I stared at my phone for a long time before I deleted that one. Jennifer noticed, of course. She had that particular talent for reading silences. They're calling you, she said. It wasn't a question. Yep. And? And nothing. I'm not interested in whatever they're selling. She nodded slowly. You've heard what happened? I make it a point not to hear what happens with Hartwell. They filed for Chapter 11 last week. I stopped what I was doing, looked up at her. What? Bankruptcy protection, the commercial division is being dissolved. They're trying to restructure around their residential projects, but she shrugged. It's not looking good. Chapter 11. Bankruptcy protection. The mighty Hartwell and Associates, 3 generations of construction legacy, circling the drain. How bad, I asked, and told myself I was asking professionally, not personally. Bad. Mason lost 4 major clients in 6 months. There were cost overruns, legal issues, one project that got stopped entirely due to safety violations. The board tried to course correct, but the damage was done. Richard had to take out personal loans to cover payroll last quarter. Personal loans. Richard Hartwell, who'd probably never borrowed money in his life, taking out loans to keep his company afloat. I'm sorry for the employees, I said. The people who didn't have anything to do with their bad decisions. Most of them have already jumped ship. I still have friends there, or I did before they got laid off. 30% of the workforce gone in the last 3 months. I sat down heavily in my office chair. This was bigger than I'd realized. Not just some projects going badly, but complete systematic failure. The kind of collapse that doesn't happen from bad luck, but from fundamental incompetence. They're saying, Jennifer continued carefully, that if they'd kept you, none of this would have happened. That losing you was the beginning of the end. That's not... I stopped, because actually, maybe it was. Maybe my absence had been the first domino, and everything else had followed from that initial act of nepotistic stupidity. My phone rang again. Richard, the same number as before. Jennifer raised her eyebrows. You going to answer? I let it ring through to voicemail. But that night, alone in my apartment, a bigger place now, in Park Slope, with actual sunlight and a kitchen that functioned, I listened to the message. Daniel. Richard's voice was different now, strained, older somehow. I realize I have no right to ask this, but I need to speak with you. It's about the company, about mistakes that were made. Please, I'm asking you, person to person. One conversation. That's all I'm requesting. Person to person. As if we'd ever been peers. I poured myself a whiskey. I'd started keeping better liquor now that I could afford it, and sat by my window, looking out at the Brooklyn brownstones lit up against the winter night. What did I owe the Hartwells? Nothing. Less than nothing. They'd taken my best years, my best work, and decided it wasn't quite good enough. They'd humiliated me, dismissed me, treated me like an interchangeable part in their family machine. But there was a but. Because I wasn't Richard. I wasn't Mason. I wasn't any of them. And maybe that meant I didn't act like them either. I called him back the next morning. Richard, I said when he answered, his voice bright with what sounded like relief. You wanted to talk. Daniel, thank you. Thank you for calling back. A pause. Can we meet in person? I don't think that's necessary. Whatever you need to say, you can say it now. All right. He took a breath and I could hear the weight in it. I'm calling to ask for your help. My help. Yes. The company is. We're in trouble, Daniel. Real trouble. The restructuring isn't going well, and the board is considering liquidation, complete closure, and I thought perhaps if you came back, if we could bring you on as a consultant or even. Stop. I cut him off, and my voice was colder than I'd intended. Let me make sure I understand. A year ago, you gave my job to your nephew because he needed it more. You offered me 8% and a junior PM as consolation for destroying my career. And now that Mason has run your company into the ground, you want me to come back and fix it? Silence. Richard, I said, the answer is no. Daniel, please. No. I have my own company now, my own clients, my own work that actually matters. Why would I abandon that to save you from the consequences of your own bad decisions? Because there are people there, good people, whose jobs are at stake, people with families, with mortgages. It was a good argument, a manipulative argument. It's good. Appeal to my sense of responsibility, my care for the collateral damage. Then maybe you should have thought about them before you prioritize family connections over competence, I said. You're right. His voice cracked slightly. You're absolutely right. I made a terrible mistake, Daniel. I chose family over merit, and I'm paying for it now. We all are. Yes, I agreed. You are. Is there anything, any amount of money, any position, any equity stake that would make you reconsider? I thought about it, really thought about it. Not because I was tempted, but because I wanted to understand what I was feeling. It wasn't satisfaction, it wasn't triumph, just a kind of sad clarity about how predictable this all was. No, I said finally, there isn't. Because it's not about money, Richard. It never was. It was about respect, about being valued for what I actually contributed, not for how useful I was to your family's needs. And you didn't respect me then. You don't respect me now. You just need me. I do respect you. If you respected me, you would have promoted me based on my work. You would have listened when I told you Mason wasn't ready. You would have treated me like a professional instead of an employee who happened to marry your daughter. Another silence. Longer this time. You're not going to help us, Richard said finally. It wasn't a question. No, I'm not. I understand. He paused. For what it's worth, I am sorry, truly. I made a choice I thought was best for my family, and I was wrong. And I'm sorry that you paid the price for my mistake. It was, I thought, probably the most honest thing Richard Hartwell had ever said to me. I appreciate that, I said. I do, but an apology doesn't erase a year of consequences. No, he agreed. It doesn't. We said goodbye with a strange formality, like diplomats ending a failed negotiation. When I hung up, I felt nothing. No anger, no vindication, no satisfaction. Just a kind of emptiness where those feelings might have been. Jennifer found me staring at my phone an hour later. You talked to him, she said. Yeah, and I said no. She nodded slowly. How do you feel about that? I don't know, I admitted. Maybe ask me in a month. But the calls didn't stop. Over the next 2 weeks, I heard from 5 different people connected to Hartwell and Associates. Former colleagues asking if I'd heard about opportunities there and board members I'd met at company functions feeling me out about consulting arrangements. Even Elizabeth, Claire's mother, left a voicemail that started with Daniel Darling and ended with a thinly veiled request for financial assistance. I didn't respond to any of them. And then Claire showed up at my office. It was late February, one of those bitter New York days where the wind cuts through every layer you're wearing. I was working on a proposal for a new client, a mid-sized community center in the Bronx, when Jennifer buzzed me. You have a visitor. You say, visitor, she said, and something in her tone made me look up. Who? Your ex-wife. I closed my eyes. Tell her I'm busy. I tried. She says she'll wait. Of course she would. I made her wait anyway. Finished the section I was working on, made myself a coffee, checked my email. 30 minutes of petty power games before I finally told Jennifer to send her in. Claire looked different, thinner, older, less polished than I remembered. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she was wearing jeans and a parka. No designer labels visible, which for Claire was like showing up naked. Danny, she said, and her voice was soft, uncertain. Claire, I gestured to the chair across from my desk. What can I do for you? She sat down, clutching her purse like a shield. I'm sure you've heard about the company. I've heard. Then you know how bad it is. I have some idea, yes. She bit her lip, a gesture I remembered from our marriage, usually deployed before asking for something. Daddy said he called you, that you refused to help. That's accurate. Danny, please. She leaned forward. I know things ended badly between us. I know I didn't. I know I should have supported you more, but this isn't about us. It's about my family, about everything they've built. Everything they built, I repeated. You mean everything my work helped sustain before they decided Mason was more important? That was a mistake. She said it fast, like ripping off a Band-Aid. We all know it was a mistake now. Mason knows it. Daddy knows it. Everyone knows it. A little late, don't you think? It doesn't have to be too late. She reached across the desk, tried to take my hand. I pulled back. You could still help. You could still save the company. And Daddy would make it worth your while. Equity, control, whatever you want. Whatever I want, I said. Interesting. Because a year ago, what I wanted was the VP position I'd earned. And I was told that wasn't possible. Because we were idiots. She was crying now, tears streaking down her face. We were stupid and privileged, and we took you for granted. I took you for granted. And I'm sorry, Danny, I'm so sorry. I looked at her, really looked at her, and tried to find some remnant of the woman I'd fallen in love with. But all I saw was desperation. Not regret for how she'd treated me, but fear of losing the comfortable life she'd always known. Claire, I said gently, I can't help you. Can't or won't. Both. I leaned back in my chair. I can't because I have my own company now, my own obligations. I have employees depending on me, clients who trust me. I can't just abandon that to fix your family's mess. And the won't part? Her voice had gone cold. I won't because they don't deserve it. Your father chose family over merit. He chose Mason's feelings over my proven track record. And now he wants me to bail him out because that same choice destroyed the company. Why would I reward that? Because you're better than us. She stood up abruptly. Because you always were. Because you're the one who actually cared about the work, about doing things right, because... She stopped, took a breath. Because that's who you are. It was a good speech, maybe even true, but it didn't change anything. I'm sorry about your family's situation, I said. I really am. I'm sorry for all the people who are losing their jobs through no fault of their own. But I'm not the solution to a problem your father created. So that's it? You're just going to let everything collapse? I'm not letting anything happen, Claire. I'm simply not preventing the natural consequences of bad decisions. There's a difference. She stared at me for a long moment, and I watched her cycle through emotions, hurt, anger, disbelief, finally landing on something like resignation. I guess I deserve that, she said quietly. This isn't about deserving anything, it's about capacity. I don't have the capacity to save Hartwell and Associates. Even if I wanted to, which I don't, the damage is too extensive. Your father needs to accept that and work with what's salvageable. There's nothing salvageable. She said it flatly, factually. He's losing everything. The company, the reputation, probably the house in Greenwich. My mother is devastated. Mason is, I don't even know, he's barely functional. I felt a flicker of something, not quite sympathy, but something adjacent to it. That's hard, I acknowledged. I'm sorry you're going through it. Are you? She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you got exactly what you wanted. Revenge. I didn't want revenge, Claire. I wanted respect. And when I couldn't get it from your family, I went and built something where I could respect myself. That's not revenge. That's survival. She nodded slowly, seemed to accept that. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever think about us? About what we could have been? I considered lying, considered the kind thing to say. But we were past kindness now. Sometimes, I admitted. But mostly, I think about how much lighter I feel without the weight of your family's expectations. how much easier it is to breathe when I'm not constantly trying to prove I'm good enough. So yeah, I think about what we could have been, and I'm grateful we're not. She flinched like I'd slapped her. And maybe that was cruel, but it was also honest. Goodbye, Danny, she said. Goodbye, Claire. She left, and I watched her go, this woman I'd once loved enough to marry. And I felt nothing, no residual affection, no lingering regret. Just the clean relief of a door finally completely closed. Jennifer appeared in my doorway 5 minutes later. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said, and realized I meant it. I really am. Hartwell and Associates filed for Chapter 7 liquidation in March. The announcement made the trades, not the front page, but enough to be noticed. Legacy construction firm closes after 75 years, read one headline. Another, Hartwell Empire falls, a case study in nepotism. That second one felt cruel, even to me. But it wasn't wrong. The assets were sold piecemeal. The office furniture, the equipment, even the company name, purchased by a competitor who wanted the client list and the historical goodwill. Richard's personal assets were hit too. The Greenwich House went on the market. So did the Summer Place in the Hamptons. Elizabeth's jewelry, Richard's art collection. The careful accumulation of generational wealth dispersed to cover debts and legal fees. I heard about it through the grapevine, not because I was looking, but because the industry talks. People remembered that I'd been there, that I'd left, that I'd apparently seen the writing on the wall. My reputation, ironically, benefited from their failure. I became the guy who'd known when to jump ship, who'd been smart enough to start his own thing before the crash. It wasn't quite accurate. I'd left out of principle, not prescience. But I didn't correct the narrative. Let them think I'd been strategic. It made future clients more confident in my judgment. By April, Foster Development Group had 9 employees and 7 active projects. We moved into a bigger office in Dumbo, the kind of light-filled space I'd always wanted when I was crammed into my decent but not great office at Hartwell. We had a culture I'd built intentionally, collaborative, innovative, focused on sustainability and community impact. We weren't the biggest firm, but we were building a reputation for quality and integrity. We were, I realized, exactly what I'd wanted to build at Hartwell but never could. One afternoon in May, Jennifer knocked on my door with a strange expression. You have a call, she said. Who? Mason Hartwell. I must have made a face because she laughed. You want me to tell him you're busy? I almost said yes, almost dismissed him the way he'd implicitly dismissed me when he'd accepted the promotion he knew he hadn't earned. But something made me curious. I'll take it, I said. Jennifer transferred the call, and Mason's voice came through my speaker. Danny, thanks for taking my call. He sounded different, older, defeated in a way that went beyond professional failure. Mason, I said neutrally, and what can I do for you? I wanted to apologize. I know it's late. I know it doesn't change anything, but I wanted to say it anyway. I leaned back in my chair, surprised despite myself. Apologize for what specifically? For taking the job, for not standing up and saying I wasn't ready, that you deserved it more, for letting Uncle Richard give me something I hadn't earned because it was easier than admitting I was in over my head. It was a better apology than I'd expected, more self-aware than I would have given him credit for. Okay, I said, I appreciate that. I destroyed the company, he continued, and his voice was thick with something, shame, grief, maybe both. Everything my grandfather built, everything Uncle Richard worked for, I destroyed it because I was too proud to admit I needed help, too insecure to accept that I wasn't as good as you. Mason. No, let me finish. He took a shaky breath. You tried to teach me. You tried to show me what I was missing, what I needed to learn, and I ignored you because I thought I knew better. Because I thought the title made me qualified, and now there's nothing left. The company's gone, and Uncle Richard lost everything. My parents won't speak to me. Claire, he stopped. Claire what? I asked despite myself. She's staying with our parents. The divorce, your divorce, it broke something in her. And then watching the company fail, watching the whole family fall apart, she's not doing well, Danny. I felt a pang of something, not responsibility. I wasn't responsible for Claire's well-being, not anymore, but something adjacent to compassion. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. Are you? He didn't sound accusatory, just curious. Sorry, I mean, because you'd have every right not to be. Every right to be happy we're getting what we deserve. I'm not happy about it, I said honestly. I'm not anything about it. It's not my circus anymore, Mason. You guys made your choices. I made mine. And now we're all living with the consequences. Yeah. He was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I see it now. What you contributed. Why you should have had that job. I see it because I tried to do what you did and I couldn't. I wasn't good enough. Wasn't smart enough. He laughed bitterly. Wasn't you. You could have been good at it, I said, surprising myself. If you'd taken the time to learn. If you'd asked for help instead of pretending you didn't need it. If your uncle had promoted you to a position you were actually ready for, instead of one that required years of experience you didn't have. You really believe that? I do. You weren't incompetent, Mason. You were unprepared. There's a difference. But the situation didn't allow for you to fail safely. You were put in charge of too much, too fast, with no real support system. That's on Richard, not on you. Another silence, then, thank you for saying that. It's the truth. Still, he cleared his throat. Anyway, I won't take up any more of your time. I needed to say I was sorry and that you were right. About all of it. Mason, I said, what are you going to do now? I don't know. Start over, I guess. Figure out who I am when I'm not Richard Hartwell's nephew. Maybe go back to school, maybe just work somewhere normal where nobody knows me. He laughed weakly, assuming anyone will hire me after this disaster. Someone will, I said. You're young. You'll recover from this. Will I? He sounded genuinely uncertain. Yeah, I said, and meant it. You will. It won't be easy, and you'll have to actually do the work this time. But you'll recover. Thanks, Danny. That's generous of you. We said goodbye after that, and I sat there for a while, thinking about generational wealth and inherited expectations and the particular cruelty of being given something you're not equipped to handle. Mason would be fine, probably. The privileged usually are, but he'd be different. Changed by failure in a way that success never changes anyone. Maybe that wasn't the worst thing. The calls stopped after that. No more Hartwells reaching out, looking for salvation or absolution or whatever they thought I could provide. They faded from my life the way they'd entered it, all at once, overwhelming and then gone. I focused on my work, on building Foster Development Group into something sustainable, something that reflected my values and my vision. We landed bigger projects, hired more people, developed a specialty in adaptive reuse and sustainable community development that got us featured in trade publications and architectural journals. By the end of the year, we were profitable, solidly, comfortably profitable. Not Hartwell level money, not that Hartwell level money had been sustainable anyway, but enough that I could pay my employees well, contribute to retirement accounts, and still have money left over for the things I actually cared about. I bought a condo in Park Slope, a 2-bedroom with exposed brick and big windows. I started dating again. Nothing serious, just reminding myself that there was life beyond work and disappointment. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage when my social life had been subsumed by the Hartwell orbit. I built a life. Not the life I'd planned when I'd married Claire, not the trajectory I'd imagined when I'd joined her father's firm, but something better, actually. Something that was wholly mine. And sometimes, late at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd think about that dinner at Le Bernardin, about Richard's carefully casual destruction of my career, about the moment I'd understood with perfect clarity that I would never be more than useful to the Hartwell family. And I'd think about the choice I'd made to leave, to walk away from the security and comfort and approval I'd been chasing, to choose the uncertainty of building something new over the certainty of staying small. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made. It was also the best one. Because here's what I learned. Sometimes the thing that feels like failure, leaving the marriage, quitting the job, starting over with nothing, is actually the first step towards something better. Sometimes what looks like loss is actually liberation. Sometimes you have to burn down the life that's killing you to make room for the one you're meant to live. It's been 3 years now since that Tuesday night at Le Bernardin. 3 years since Richard Hartwell casually dismantled my career over Dover Sole and expensive wine. 3 years since I walked out of my marriage and my job and the life I'd been trying so hard to build in their world. Foster Development Group now has 23 employees. We completed 15 projects last year, with a gross revenue that would have made Richard's eyes water. Not because it's astronomical, but because it's all mine. No family obligations, no nepotistic promotions, no one questioning whether I've earned what I've built. We won an award last month, Innovative Firm of the Year, from the Sustainable Development Council. Jennifer accepted it with me because she'd been there from the beginning, had taken the risk of joining a startup when she could have stayed safely employed at a failing but familiar company. In her speech, she thanked me for having the courage to walk away from the wrong thing so we could all walk toward the right thing. I thought about that phrase for days afterward. The courage to walk away. Because here's the thing they don't tell you about walking away. It doesn't feel courageous in the moment. It feels terrifying. It feels like failure. It feels like you're giving up, admitting defeat, letting them win. But sometimes, often actually, walking away is the only way to win. Not win in the sense of defeating them, but win in the sense of preserving yourself, your dignity, your sense of what you're worth. I ran into Claire last month, completely by accident. We were both at the same coffee shop in Manhattan. She was meeting a friend, and I was grabbing something between meetings. Our eyes met across the room, and for a second I thought about pretending I hadn't seen her. But I went over instead. Claire, Danny. She stood up, awkward, uncertain. How are you? Good. Really good, actually. You? I'm. She paused, seemed to recalibrate. I'm okay, getting there, Mun. She looked different than she had in my office that day. Healthier. There was color in her cheeks, and her eyes weren't as hollow. She was dressed more simply than I'd ever seen her during our marriage. Jeans, a sweater, minimal jewelry. I heard about your award, she said. The sustainable development thing, that's really amazing. Thank you. It's been a lot of work, but good work. I'm glad. She smiled, and it looked genuine. I'm glad you're doing well, that you got out when you did. How's your family? I asked because it felt polite. Dad's working for the firm that bought the Hartwell name. Consulting mostly. It's hard for him not being in charge anymore, but he's adapting. She fiddled with her coffee cup. Mason's in Chicago. Went back to school for project management, actually. Decided to learn it properly this time. Good for him. And she took a breath. I'm working again at a nonprofit, arts education for kids, similar to what I did before we got married. That's great, Claire, really. It is, she nodded. It's good to be doing something that matters, something that's mine, you know? I did know. That was exactly what I knew. We talked for a few more minutes, surface level stuff, catching up without getting too deep. And then her friend arrived, and we said our goodbyes. But before she left, she touched my arm briefly. Danny, I'm sorry for all of it, for not standing up for you, for choosing my family over our marriage, for not seeing you clearly. I know, said she. I appreciate that. You were right to leave. I know that too. She smiled, sad but real. And then she was gone, swallowed back into the anonymity of the city. I thought about that conversation for the rest of the day, about apologies and closure, and the strange relief of seeing someone who'd hurt you become someone better. Claire was finding her way back to herself, and I was happy for her. Not in a way that made me want to reconnect, but in a genuine wish for her well-being. We'd both been diminished by the Hartwell orbit, both smaller than we should have been. And now we were both trying to figure out who we were outside of that influence. Different paths, same lesson. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself, for everyone, is leave. I still get calls sometimes, from former Hartwell employees looking for work, from clients who knew me from my time there and want to work with my new firm, from competitors who remember what I built and want to learn how I did it. Each one is a small vindication, proof that my work mattered, that my contributions were real, that I wasn't crazy for believing I deserved better, but the real vindication isn't external, it's internal. It's waking up every morning and not dreading the day. It's working on projects I actually care about with people I respect and who respect me. It's building something that reflects my values, not someone else's legacy. It's the ability to look at myself in the mirror and like who I see. That's the thing about dignity. Once you've lost it, once you've let yourself be diminished for long enough, finding it again feels like learning to breathe properly. Like you've been taking shallow breaths for years without realizing it, and suddenly there's air, deep, clean air that fills your lungs completely. I think about Richard sometimes, about whether he understands what he lost when he chose Mason over me. Not just the revenue, though that was significant. Not just the stability, though that would have been valuable. But the opportunity to build something real, to create a company based on merit and innovation instead of bloodlines and entitlement. He could have had that. We all could have had that. But he chose family over excellence, chose comfort over growth, chose the short-term ease of keeping peace with his nephew over the long-term strength of making the right decision. And now he's a consultant at a firm that bought his family name, working for someone else, taking orders instead of giving them. There's no satisfaction in that for me. Or maybe there is, but it's not the triumphant vindication I might have imagined in those early angry days. It's more like confirmation, proof that competence matters, that consequences are real, that you can't indefinitely reward mediocrity without paying for it. The universe has a way of balancing accounts, and not through karma or cosmic justice, but through simple mathematics. Bad decisions compound into bad outcomes. Good work, consistent effort, integrity, these things compound too. More slowly, maybe, less dramatically, but more sustainably. I'm 38 now, still young enough to build more, old enough to appreciate what I've learned. And if I could go back to that Tuesday night, to the moment Richard told me they were giving my job to Mason, what would I do differently? Nothing. I'd still walk away, still choose uncertainty over humiliation, still bet on myself instead of waiting for them to see my value. Because that's the final lesson. No one is coming to save you. No one is going to recognize your worth if you won't recognize it yourself. No one is going to defend your dignity if you keep surrendering it for their comfort. You have to save yourself. You have to walk away from the wrong thing, even when it's terrifying, even when everyone tells you you're making a mistake, even when you don't know what comes next. You have to trust that something better is possible, and then you have to build it. My phone is ringing right now. As I write this, it's ringing. The caller ID says Richard Hartwell. It's been 6 months since I heard from any of them. 6 months of silence, which has been its own kind of peace, but apparently that peace is over. I could answer, could find out what he wants this time. Another apology, another request for help, some piece of closure he thinks he needs. But I already know what he wants, doesn't matter. Because I'm not in the business of saving people from themselves anymore. I'm not in the business of proving my worth to people who've already decided I don't have it. I'm not in the business of accepting scraps and calling it sustenance. I'm in the business of building things that matter with people who value what I bring on terms that respect my time and my talent. The phone stops ringing, goes to voicemail. I don't listen to the message. Instead, I pull up the proposal I've been working on, a mixed-use development in the South Bronx that will include affordable housing, community spaces, and a small business incubator. It's the kind of project that won't make me rich, but will make a difference. The kind of work I couldn't have done at Hartwell, because it didn't fit their model, their approach, their narrow vision of what mattered, but it fits mine, and that's enough. More than enough. It's everything. So when my phone lights up again, another call, another voicemail, another request I don't know, I silence it, turn it over, get back to work. Because here's the truth, they never tell you about revenge. The best revenge isn't destruction, isn't even success necessarily. The best revenge is building a life so good, so full, so aligned with your values that what they did to you becomes irrelevant. Background noise. A story you tell sometimes, but without heat, without bitterness. Just a factual recounting of the time you had to walk away from the wrong thing to make room for the right thing. The best revenge is peace, and I have that now. They keep calling, but I don't pick up. I don't need to. I've already won.